Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jeff Wells. I'm an assistant professor of history at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. I'd like to welcome you to this Brown Bag History Lecture Series sponsored by the UNK History Department. The series is offered in partnership with the Nebraska State Historical Society. Lectures are held on the second Wednesday in selected months at the Kearney Public Library. The programs are taped before a live audience and are broadcast on public access channels in Lincoln, Omaha, Bellevue, Hastings, North Platte, Grand Island, Papillion, and South Sioux City and Beatrice, and are posted on the Nebraska State Historical Society's YouTube channel. A schedule for the series, as well as information about all of the History Department's programs, may be found at www.unk.edu/academics/history. Information about all of the Nebraska State Historical Society's programs and services may be found at www.nebraskahistory.org. If you are not already a member, I encourage you to join the Nebraska State Historical Society. Membership benefits include subscriptions to Nebraska History magazine and the Society's newsletter, use of a microfilm reader and printer at the Society's library archives to make free copies from microfilm at the Society's reading room in Lincoln, free admission to the Society's 7 historic sites, and discounts at the Society's landmark stores at the History Museum in Lincoln, the State Capitol, and at Chimney Rock. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to thank the UNK Department of History, the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation, and the Kearney Public Library for their support. The YouTube page where these will be posted is at www.youtube.com/user/Nebraska Historical. Our speakers today are Dr. Elaine Batenhorst and Meredith Underwood. Dr. Batenhorst is an emeritus professor of teacher education at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. She earned her bachelor's and master's degrees at Kearney State College and her PhD at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She retired after 30 years as a faculty member in UNK's College of Education. She was the founding president of the Fort Kearney Genealogy Society and is a longtime member of the Buffalo County Historical Society and a volunteer at the Society's Trails and Rails Museum. She teaches senior college courses on Buffalo County history and is a full-time grandmother to 6 grandchildren. A native of Whitensville, Massachusetts, Meredith Underwood attended the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and studied in Scotland prior to moving to Nebraska in 2012. She is a second-year graduate student in history and a graduate assistant in the history department at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. She has presented at the Missouri Valley History Conference, and she works at the Trails and Rails Museum. She also serves as the editor of Buffalo Tales, the Buffalo County Historical Society's bi-monthly newsletter. In the interest of time, we ask that our audience hold questions until the end of the presentation, when we will have a question and answer session. So at that time, please step over here to the microphone to ask your questions. Now, will you please join me in welcoming our speakers?
Well, we thank you for this opportunity. I didn't know that, I didn't write that much stuff in my little, so I'm glad you did your work. We came up with this idea to do weddings through the years because right now, Buffalo County Historical Society is working on weddings throughout the year. We have a nice display, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we've had a really exciting, either end of summer or beginning of fall, by dedicating our new Family History Center. And this afternoon, in case anybody wants some fitness workout, we're starting to move the archives, so we could use your help, but it's going to take muscle. We've got trucks lined up, so that's okay. We looked at weddings because our thought was that maybe because we're kind of in the rural area, that we might be a little behind the trends, because when I was growing up, a lot of times the fads would start on the West Coast and East Coast, and by the time they got here, they were gone. So we thought maybe that happened with weddings, but as we're going to show you, that's not exactly how we've seen it. Contemporary weddings were considered at one time to be June was the month for weddings. But as I do things transcribing marriage license, that isn't always true. I know it's not true now, but it wasn't back in 1890s either. A lot of the times, wedding dresses were chosen. People had to have their best dress because they couldn't always out here, well, and I think every place. A dress for one day is not a frugal thing. I mean, it is, we're more practical. And I think we found that across the country too. But said that Americans didn't always wear white, but we're finding with ours they did. But mainly because in the 19th century, it was almost impossible to clean white cloth unless you were rich and had somebody to do it. I remember a picture I saw at Joslin Museum, and these women are in white dresses out fishing, and somebody commented, you can tell they come from a wealthy family because they don't have to wash their dresses. And I think we find that with the wedding fabrics. So colors were chosen a lot. They avoided green because at that time it was not, wasn't lucky. And blue was a popular color. A few colors, like pink maybe, and those kind of things. So the first marriage ceremony in Buffalo County was in 1871, and the first in Kearney Junction was the following year. So wedding trends have changed drastically, as fashion has, through the years.
So like Elaine was saying, our main overall thesis is going into this project, we thought we would find that Buffalo County was severely behind the trends happening on the coast, just because it was so far from New York City, Los Angeles, whatever it may be. But we slowly found out that that was not the case. An example of this that you'll see in our presentation is in the late 20s, Buffalo County brides were actually ahead about maybe 10 years in their hairstyles. So they were already doing the curls, the pin curls, that we really didn't see in other parts of the country until the 30s. And another thing that is kind of obvious, but should be worth noting, is that you can really see history just through the wedding trends. So, for instance, the 1920s, it's clear that Hollywood is starting to affect fashion. By the 1930s, it's clear that the Depression is affecting fashion. And then by the 40s, obviously the war is affecting fashion. So history can be told through fashion. It's an important story to tell because a lot of people kind of just think about fashion as an aesthetics, not so important, but it does have quite the story to be told. So real quick before we start going, some common themes that Elaine and I found out throughout the presentation was obviously when we think of brides, we think of they're in dresses, they're in skirts. That's clear starting all the way back in 1891. All of our brides had one or the other. Lace was always popular, whether it be in the veil or the dress, it was always there in some form. It was even a tiny ruffle. And then their veils never went out of style. They changed in style, but they never went out of style. So we'll go for pre-1900s. So we have our lovely sketch here. And so some things that you'll notice, we have in bullet points here, but as we go through, this is, do you want to talk about Enoch and Marie?
This is actually a dress that we have on display right now, and it doesn't show in the actual picture photo as well. But it was a satin gown. It had a V-neck dress, and it's kind of a jacket form, and so the trends at that time said a lot of them were jackets. She does, you can see the bouquet over here, and the headpiece, and you can also notice, and I bought this just especially for this, you can see the veil down here. We don't have the veil. We wish we did. But that was one of the first ones that we have some pictures. Most of our pictures are from the Pleasanton Centennial book and the Amherst Centennial book. So they are copies of pictures from those books. So they're not real clear. We're hoping that as the years go by, we may get more pictures in.
This dress is really fancy. It should be worth noting that they were a wealthy family. They were from Omaha originally and moved to Kearney, and then created the X paint shop, which was in Kearney for years and years. So you can tell that they were of a wealthier family just based on the fact that her wedding gown is pretty ornate with the lace and the ruffles, and it's extremely small. So
very small waistlines. Okay, Phoebe in 1894. And this is actually netting over, well, somehow there. It's a netting type thing, even though it looks furry. But she also has, you'll see the jacket. One of the things that we notice later, they talk about the mutton sleeves. They're fuller at the top and they're fitted at the bottom, and so she does have that. I always like when I look at old photos to see how they have some furniture in the back. So I don't know if the pictures were taken at a photographer's shop or at the church. That's something we would like to find out more about.
And it's interesting with this picture, just a side note, that they're holding hands. That's rare.
And Phoebe does. You can't see the veil up there, but you can notice down in the bottom she does have a veil on there.
And he also looks very modern to me. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but he looks extremely modern.
Now this is difficult. This is John and Anna Gunst. And her dress was more, I think one of the things said they didn't have us full skirts, and it's more of a tailored skirt. She does have a veil, but you also notice I tried to show you that the crown was flowers, and you can kind of see the flowers that hold the veil. And then she had a very nice little bouquet. And we did find that bouquets changed through the years in all of these. This picture, now this is just my judgment. I think it was a homemade dress. I just have that feeling. I sew, and so I can say that. But it definitely was colored. It might have been a light gray or even a pinkish color. It has the mutton sleeves. And you'll notice something through some of these pictures that generally the men got to sit in the pictures. I think we have one where the woman is sitting, but not. And this story is Hugh actually married the neighbor's daughter. So we do know a little bit about that family. But I don't see anything on Elizabeth's head. Now, it might have been taken off for the picture too. Okay, this is a very special picture, and I will admit it wasn't, they didn't get married right here in Buffalo County. They were from Buffalo County, but they eloped to Minden. This is my grandmother, and her dress was actually a brown color. And look at her tiny, tiny waist. I love her hair. She does not have the full sleeve, the fluffies. It looks more like a cape type, but she does have the fitted. But here's Grandpa sitting down, you know. And someone made a comment about, now these, I think they've got a little smile on their face, but mainly they said a lot of these pictures, the women did not smile, but you would not have either if you couldn't breathe. And they're held together. I don't know what the men's story is on all of those, because they could breathe.
Don't want the women to feel left out. So in the 1900s, we see the S-shaped corset, the wide puffy sleeves, high necklines, long trains. So pretty much what we just saw in the 1890s. But now they're starting to have hats, either veiled hats or just hats. And one thing to note is the Gibson girls hairstyle was starting to be more prominent at this time as well. It was just the style that was kind of fluffy on top of the head with like the sweeping curls, which you'll see through here.
Okay, Clara has, no, they still, it did not say they had the mutton sleeves, but they still do very much in these pictures. And one thing with the S-shaped corset, it held them in, but it makes for a blousier top. It brought them up and out, is what some things said. Now, Claire has a very nice headpiece holding that veil on. And her flower, her bouquet, has flowers that you would see if you could see a clearer picture of her hat. So I said, these are pictures from a book, so they're hard. There were some photos that we could kind of take a picture of the photo. We couldn't take them out of the exhibit. So, but that was in 1906, so we're going to go up through the 1900s here. Trina's dress was a colored dress, and I think she might be taller than he is in this picture.
Maybe it's just her hat.
Well, but she's taller too if you look where the hairline is. But she has the Gibson hairline. He has the parted hairline, which you'll notice with the men. You are going to see that part. She's carrying one flower, and I'm not sure if that was her bouquet or if this was just for the photographer. I like the sweeping collar and the lace down the front. Now, Morris and Ida, I'm pretty sure her dress was homemade. I do not know a whole lot about Ida. I know that Morris came from a farming family, which most of our people did that were in Pleasanton and Amherst. But you can see the ruffle on her dress, so I'm thinking she probably made the dress. And he's very serious. This one we love. You will notice some of the pictures that we have in here were because Meredith and I decided we really liked the picture. And we think that Ida's just a riot here. Well, and Lloyd's hair is really neat. But she does have, you can see the S-shaped corset. She has shorter sleeves, you will notice, but she also has that I think that's a tulle type, ruffled type thing on the head with the deal. And there is kind of a lace effect down here. If you look on the veil, and she's got lace down the front of her dress. She has a very pretty bouquet of roses.
It's interesting just to point out, remember how I was kind of talking about how Buffalo County might be a little bit before the times? So the shorter sleeves was something that we see a lot in the 1910s and 1920s. So Miss Ida here, before the times, just a little bit.
Okay, Herman and Julia. I'm not sure. I haven't quite decided about this picture, but Julia's just kind of standing like I'm here. But very simple bow. She does have the ruffles on her dress and more of an A-line shaped dress. A little bit of the fluffy sleeves with the mutton bottom. The story with Herman and Julia is that when they were at the ceremony, Herman could not find the marriage license. He's rummaged through his pockets, and finally the minister says, Herman, when you find it, bring it to me, and go on. And they went on with the ceremony. Notice the chair Herman's sitting in. We see that chair again and again. So this is what makes me wonder if they went to the photographer for this picture or if it was in the church. That's something I think that I'm going to follow through by looking at marriage license to see exactly where they were married.
So we come to the 1910s, starting to see hints of the 1920s, coupled with the 1900s. So the Empire line gown with less full skirts, so getting the slimmer skirts. Sleeves were short, like we saw with Ida in 1908. They were short or to the elbow. Lace design, veils with either floral lace designs, and then the mob cap, which is just like basically a lace cap style that was pretty popular in the 1920s actually as well. And the hairstyles, expecting to see big, curly, and pinned. Hats were also popular, and that's a reason why the hair would be pinned and curly and big, is so that you can see them under, no matter the size of the hat. See the hair? Like this hat. You can see
Okay,
it.
and this was the picture that I chose for the hat. I found this one after we had kind of our pictures, and I said, well, we have to include it because Rose definitely has a hat to behold.
Do you guys all see the hat? Do you want me to point out?
Okay. Her sleeves are shorter. I can't say that that's an empire waist. It, might be up a little higher, and she probably could do that because she has a smaller waist. Sometimes as her waists get bigger, then we look like we have an empire waist. But her dress is definitely a colored, so colors were still being worn a lot. This is another question that I had as we were doing that, because with my grandmother's picture, they were married by a justice of peace. So I'm wondering how many of these might have been married by a justice of peace, and that's something else I do want to look on the marriage license to follow through, because it would be interesting to see. There's the chair again. Okay, this is one that we have the dress on display, and so I do have a little sample there. And this is, I've got to think of who that is.
Isn't it Ryder?
Yes, Ryder. And they were married in 1912.
Well, that's Agnes's maiden
Oh,
name.
Burton.
Yeah,
Okay.
but-
Her hair kind of reminds me of my grandmother's, the way it was kind of curly on the side. But when Meredith said they had the curlier hair in this type thing, he decided to part his hair on the side, though, here. Roy did. He kind of has a morning jacket. And you will notice there's lace down the front. I am thinking, as we look at the actual dress, that maybe part of this was the fabric they bought, but I'm thinking maybe there was a lot of handwork that went in on that dress.
For sure. Just so you guys kind of know, the Kearney connection, Harvey Park and Kearney is named after their kids, grandkids, that family. I want to say it was their daughter who married into the Harvey line, but it's a pretty notable Kearney people. This is their ancestors.
Okay, this is John and Rose, or Joe and Rose. Look at her bouquet. There's some calla lilies in there, and it's a huge bouquet. Now, she might have what you would think is an empire waist, but it's still pretty full. She also has a fabric rose on the front, but the panels are lace. She has the headpiece that's flowered and the veil that comes down the back. So a lot of times the veils were still very long throughout this. And this chair is a little different, but you'll see it again. All right, this picture is really different from the dresses that we were seeing in that stage. Anna, it does come up a little higher. She still has long sleeves. It's cotton and a collar. Looks like almost like that polished cotton. But it also has a kind of a dropped waist, which we may see more of in the 20s. And there he is in kind of the chair that the guy right before was. Okay, and I chose this one because I thought this looked like the Statue of Liberty hat, the crown. But her dress has a lot of lace. Look at the lace skirt, like the apron. It's blousy on top, so she's still kind of still doing the pre-1900s or 1910s. Very, very serious though. But they are holding hands, and you didn't see a whole lot of physical touch in a lot of these pictures.
Unless it was just a hand on the shoulder.
Yes.
And just pointing out the layer on her dress, see that a lot more in the 1950s.
This one we just thought looked sweet, except for his hair. We liked his hair. But Isadora's dress does have kind of a lace detail. It also has a little apron type. She's carrying flowers, but there's flowers in her waistband and a corsage plus flowers in her as her headpiece. But the veil you can see goes clear down to the back. I'm not sure what they had tags on them for. Some of these pictures have tags, so we don't know. Okay, 1920s.
So, very popular decade for a lot of people to reminisce on or try and mimic the fashion trends in today's society. So for weddings, we can expect to see shorter above the knee or on the knee. Veils from either a flapper type style or the cap that had either lace attached to it or was just simply made of lace to either cover the hair or make the hair more pronounced in the front. Usually there was no clinching in the waist like we saw in the earlier 1900s, or 1890s. With a straight silhouette. V-neck was popular, the drop tip, and then we see long sleeves starting to come back, or elbow sleeves. And then kind of interesting is this is about the time when jewelry started being popularized, as well as embellishments on dresses that weren't lace.
Okay. Bouquet too.
And the bouquet.
Bouquets were huge. They said really huge at that time. Now, the first wedding is right in 1920, and so I still think we're back a decade here a little bit. She did have the bigger bouquet, and Pete got to sit down where the whole rest of the bridal party had to stand up. She has the cap with the veil, so that is kind of a hat with the flowers in that. Okay, this one is Robert and Louise. Look at Louise's bouquet. When they said bouquets were huge, that people spent money on flowers then. She also has that flowered headpiece with the veil. The veil is a little bit shorter, but so is her dress. And she has what they said that people in the 20s wore the kitten heels, the little kitten heels. But hers have bows on the front. He definitely has what you would call a morning jacket, the longer jacket.
And we have a dress pretty similar to this on display in the Trails and Rails Family History Center. It's a dress from the Sheen family, and she has the kitten heels that look very similar to this picture, as well as the dress is pretty similar as well to this picture, ending just after the knees with the shorter sleeves.
Okay, in this picture we see that a little different dress. It's definitely, I think, would be her best dress maybe. Famous there. She doesn't have anything on her hair, so this is why I would like to check to see exactly where this picture was, where they were married. But look at her bouquet. No drawbacks when it came to cost for bouquets. It's kind of like when you see a bouquet that big, I'm thinking of, I just celebrated my 50th anniversary and my husband ordered roses, but when he was calling to order the roses, he said to the guy, maybe I should have 50, and the guy said, only if you want to hawk your house. So I'm wondering how much the bouquets set them back. But you will notice, look at her hair. Later we're going to talk about some things with hair, but this was more a 30s style hair do. Okay, and then we have Minnie, and who was it just told me something about that family just the other day. They said, oh, they were married in the Lutheran church in Amherst, I think. Whoever saw the picture. But notice Minnie's big, big bouquet. Now she's standing behind the chair, so she didn't let Carl sit down. She said, nope, Carl, you can't. But her dress is a shorter dress. And it looks in the picture, if you to look at it very closely, it looks brocaded on the top as well as the bottom there. And this one, we definitely have a 30s style hairdo for her. Albin still has kind of the parted there. Ella's dress, I almost feel like it's kind of a knit type thing. I mean, I just feel that way. I'm not sure. She's wearing the pearl necklace as we see jewelry come out, and she just has a simple corsage.
So the 1930s, Great Depression era, due to economic hardship, many chose to wear their nicest dress. Floral Kathleen was popular. The dropped waist was still around. And then we see colored dresses again with people wearing their nicest dress since there was so much economic.
It says all of this about the trends, but then over here she has this elegant dress, so it doesn't quite fit.
Right.
Okay, this first picture the wedding was in a house. It was done in their living room, and then the picture was taken outside. The dress has very short sleeves, and it was orchid color. She has pearl necklace, but she has what we call the finger curls, or somebody said Marcel hairdo, and she has her bouquet is kind of around her wrist, but when I read the marriage clipping, this is my mother, it said that her bouquet was made of sweetheart roses and sweet peas. And her dress was orchid, and then her bridesmaid, which was her sister, was a green organza. All right, Clyde and Ellen also wore like just a nice dress. It does have lace on the sleeves. The flower in the front is the fabric flower, and she has a beautiful necklace on there. But notice her hair with the finger waves. And then we have this one, and we both really like this dress. It just looks like something you've seen before. And Louise really has a sweet smile too, but she has the finger curls. And the thing is, Frank is smiling in this picture too. It looks like she's wearing a kind of a bolero sweater with that. All right, now this dress I'll let Meredith talk about.
This is my favorite dress ever. So this is on display at Trails and Rails in our lobby as well. Bernard Eckhow and Mary Nickman were married in 1933. Her first layer, this dress is just super interesting because the dress is actually completely see-through. It's just a lace overlay. And then under, she had a lining that went down pretty much to where the dress went, say for a couple inches. And then it was just spaghetti strapped. And then she had long sleeves for the lace, so it was completely transparent, her entire shoulder and arms. And then she had a crown, a silk flower crown with a veil attached. And then we see jewelry present with her, as well as the bigger bouquet. And this is just a really neat dress. What you can't see in this picture is she also has a belt that went around with like rhinestones and pearls, pretty ornate little belt buckle that she wore. I guess she kind of wore it right here around her belly button, but it's just a very, very nice dress. It's in really good shape for how old it is.
And the calla lilies are pretty.
And the dress was actually donated by their daughter, which is really cool.
Okay, this is another dress that we have on display, and it's a navy blue velvet dress. This was worn by Ardella Webb. The top is beads. It's just rows and rows of little beads, and beautifully done. So I don't know. I know that a lot of times wedding dresses have been done with the beaded, but I just think that would take a lot of work. The belt is rhinestone clasp, and Ardella Webb did teach it in our the campus school that we had out here at UNK, well, Kearney State College at that time. So she taught, and they were from the Odessa area.
And these last two pictures are pretty interesting. In the 1930s, we're in the Great Depression, and they're pretty ornate. With the 1930s, we see a lot of more just waist and up portraits, so we don't see the full body as well, and that could be because, you know, they're wearing more casual style. They don't have the nicest thing to show off. So we're in the 1940s now. Wartime dictated kind of what women wore. So we saw a lot of suits with jackets and skirts. Veils were shorter, and they were often attached to a hat that the woman probably already owned. If the gowns were worn, they were rounded at the shoulders with padding, gathered sleeves, and we see the corseted waist begin to happen again.
Now the first picture is right at the turn of the decade, and so we feel like the war hasn't started, so they maybe had more time to plan this. Some of the weddings that we see during the war, they may have had 3 days to plan their wedding. This is the day I'll be home. We have to, you know, rush this through. She has a beautiful bouquet. She also has, and that's something I did read, and I can't remember, when the veils used to cover the face, they didn't always cover the face. But that one definitely was one that came down over her face. This was during the war, and she definitely has like a suit type jacket and flowers, the corsage. The hair is a definitely 40s style hair. And this was a couple that he was serving. And they immediately, I think, were sent to California right after the wedding.
You start to see makeup become previous. Makeup was more minimal. Women wanted to look unmade. That was the fashion trend. And then slowly we start to see eyebrows especially, and then the made up faces coming to the 1940s where her lipstick is very prominent, her eyeliner.
Okay, Ruby. I couldn't decide if that was a uniform, but I don't think it was. I think she just had a suit on. But definitely another war bride. Her hair with the little flower, or the little ringlets in the top. Very serious, but right during the war. So it was difficult times for people. And this one's a little blurry, and I apologize for that. But Sylvia has probably her best dress on at the time, but she's got the pearl necklace. We can't see, like we said, so many of the pictures in the 1930s and the 40s, we see waist only. We don't see the full picture.
And then I did read, when kind of doing some research for this, that in the 1940s, there wasn't a lot for flowers in the way of bouquets or corsages. They used silk flowers, fabric flowers, more so because gardens were more readily used for food. So it was the same in the 1930s, that they wanted to use their gardens for the necessities as opposed to weddings. So we're in the 1950s now. We've come so far. Ballerina length, we start to see the fuller skirts again, the fitted bodices again. Gloves are common. Shorter veils. Sweetheart neckline is very common. The strapless gowns. That sounds very familiar to today's society. It's very popular. They did wear jackets, some brides, depending, and then the dress is often tiered and covered with lace.
Okay, the first picture we have, this was a dress that was made by Delda's mother, and she made this dress with the sewing machine that she gave Delda for a wedding gift. So she had bought it earlier. It has, you'll notice the neckline, but that's also the tooled cover up there with the little choker thing. The veil is made out of netting too. Those are just puffs. And she has the satin shoes on, which made me think, and I didn't have time to look this up, but I don't know when satin shoes really came into the mode, because I remember weddings that as bridesmaids, you had your satin shoes dyed. Of course, you only wore it that one time, but I'm thinking that maybe it was in the 50s that they started. Okay, Delta is holding, you really can't tell, but notice how whatever she has, because at that time a lot of people had Bibles in their hands with the little ribbons with the flowers on them. And I'm not, yeah, hers is a Bible. You can see with the flowers on top. And then this next picture also has, she is holding the same type of flower thing. Her veil almost looks like a crown. She has the pearl necklace, but it also is like the sweetheart neckline, but with the tulle at the top to cover up. You know, we might bare ourselves a little bit, but we still had to be covered a little bit. Carol's headdress is pearls. Those are pearls that have been woven into the crown. She has the long sleeves that were very typical of those dresses. She has the neckline that, like I said, you know, we see the dip, but we also see covering it up. She's carrying a Bible. Her skirt is much fuller. And then this one has a skirt much, much fuller. And this was floor length. I think the last two were ballerina lengths, but this one was floor length. She's carrying a Bible. Her veil does not come clear down, no. It only comes to the lower hips.
Wasn't this your sister?
That was my sister. I would have had a few more in there if I could have found the pictures, but and that we can show you the resources, but that kind of concludes up to 59. Now, I thought about wearing my dress, which would have been the 60s, but I don't think I could have gotten it on. I could have gotten the veil on. And I made my dress, and it was an empire waist, so.
Yeah, that, now you can kind of see how Buffalo County wasn't so far behind the times like people like to think Nebraska can be. In fact, they may have been just a little bit ahead of the times. So we hope you enjoyed seeing a little bit of wedding history.
Okay, I know from here in Buffalo County from my secretary saying her parents were married in their mom and dad, the bride's mother's house. So do you think the weddings took place at homes rather than in churches? And then, of course, they had the pictures formal?
A lot of times they did. For instance, my mother, like I said, they were married in the living room. And it tells on the marriage license sometime in the residence of so-and-so's parents. I want to go back and look at that a little bit more. We really didn't have that much time to do that, but it would be interesting. And then it would also be interesting to see which ones took place in the courthouse. And a lot of times it will say courthouse.
We have a golden wedding dress in the lobby of Trails and Rails that is from Ruth Dryden, and then we have her daughters too, but we have their wedding announcement article, and it talks about how they decorated the bride's family home with like the flowers, and it started promptly at 8 o'clock, so it was kind of interesting to see how they really put out all the stops. And it was normally in the bride's family's home, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting article if you ever had time to stop by and read it.
And also they used to describe the dresses. They went into detail of all about the, not just the empire waist, but everything. And the day of the week of weddings, what did you find? Because yeah, Friday and Saturday was not.
My sister, my oldest sister who wasn't there, was married on a Sunday. A lot of them were married Mondays and Tuesdays. You're not going to find that unless you know sometimes the calendar. But I read too that as far as early newspaper clippings, they didn't always tell you about the wedding. They might have told you where the couple went, and they told that they got married, but they wouldn't describe the dress until the 30s. Said it came in the 1930s. Now somebody contradicted me yesterday on that and said, oh, her grandparents were from Franklin and it told complete detail. Well, someone else told me they thought details started coming out when you bought it in a bridal shop that gave you all Chantilly lace and all of this kind of thing. So they gave you what it was really made. We maybe, you know, wouldn't have known all those terms back in 1895, I don't know.
In terms of your thesis comparing the fashion trends and being ahead of the times or with the times, do you think that's specific to wedding dresses compared to everyday wear? Because with wedding dresses, a bride would do the research and say, well, what's going on in New York City? And, you know, what's going on in Los Angeles or London, you know, depending on the time. So that, you know, they might be more aware of the fashion and then make the effort to get the pattern or the seamstress to make something. Yeah, so do you think weddings and then a certain class perhaps might be more in tune with the times rather than saying generally Kearney was with the times, but maybe
you know,
just with
we don't really know as far as, but it would be something to look at because a lot of times when the dress for the wedding, because a lot of these people were farm people that we showed you today. Now, not all of the pictures that maybe we found, but on the farm, you probably wore your jeans out there doing whatever farm work. In fact, one of the pictures, I think it might have been Rose Nickman, they said that she did all the farm work and blah, blah, blah through the thing. And so, you know.
Well, I think because the wedding industry, you know, as a commercial industry, they're going to be making an effort to reach out to future brides. It's not an everyday thing.
Yeah,
and so
It's going to be more nationalized.
For the purpose of like this presentation, that the stretch to say the Buffalo County was either ahead of the times or with the times should only apply to wedding fashion. So that is a good point to emphasize, and especially from my experiences just being from the East Coast. Like I know that there are some trends that don't quite make it to
We don't get them
Nebraska, because I know when I came to Nebraska the first time, like for school, they thought I was out of fashion, and I was. You know, my clothes I was wearing were very in the South, but very out of fashion in the North. So yeah, but for the purpose of this, yeah, it would be safe to say that for weddings, you have to think when girls are getting married, they kind of go.
But they also were planned very quickly. They weren't like now where you plan for a year and a half for your wedding. Theirs might have been a month or two.
So, yeah, that is a good point.
Thank you for the research. I thought it was great. One of the things that I was wondering about in your studies of the marriage license that were available, it appeared prior to the 1940s, the bride and groom appeared older to me than you take the onset of the 1940s. They appeared during wartime they appeared younger.
That would be another thing to check out on those marriage licenses because, you know, as I copy marriage licenses, a lot of gals were married when they were 16. These I do not know because we didn't have a chance to check that. But that's something, this is one of those research things that was just done for this, but it's going to carry on.
They just appeared older sometimes in some of the pictures.
Well, and that might have been the times too, you know.
Right.
As a farm girl, I may not have had time to really take care of my skin and this whole thing. I don't know,
That was my thought. And the young men working out in the fields.
Right.
From an early age on.
So how did this fit with your?
I think probably very typical. You know, in Missouri we had the Fort Crowder and Neo show, the Young Time. The 1940s looked very typical of the pictures that I've seen. And my parents were born married in 1943. Very typical. So.
I came a little bit late. I was just wondering about the Copes. Did you come up with anything about Ron or Carol Cope's wedding, since they're such a important people in our community?
We should have, since today is the Cope special day. And we didn't. Sorry.
No, I was just wondering, are there any pictures out there of their wedding?
I would say probably in Carol Cope's files that we have not had a chance to go through. I'm sure there are some pictures. because when you think, I'm wondering when, that's a good question. I'm going to go back. Well, I won't have time this afternoon to look, but I will check that.
You do a whole thing on just her and her hats too. Yeah, just her, Carol and her hats. Okay, thank you.
I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. It looked like there's a few maybe European immigrants who were in the first decade that you showed. Did you happen to notice any differences in like their styles compared to, say, what Americans were?
No, we didn't
wearing?
because, some of the things we read, especially like 1895s and those, talked about not having white dresses. All of ours did except for my grandmother. And she wasn't, she was born and raised in the United States, so it wasn't, so I don't know, maybe, because remember when they came too, they really, it was like a melting pot, and we tried to do what everybody else was doing. So I think, that could be a thing that came through with those white dresses. They wanted to be like everyone else. I don't know. Good question. I said to ask questions we could answer.
I was just wondering, through all of the decades, if there was one decade that you saw the most change.
Gosh.
You would think the 1920s would be because more risque. I'm not sure we got that risque out here. We did have the shorter dresses, but when I saw some magazine pictures from back east, they definitely, those dresses were more risque than we saw with ours. So, and then the 1950s.
I was gonna say, like the 1950s, I feel like shows the most change. It shows how society's changing as well. And then it also is the most modern. So a lot of the dresses and the design of the dresses we see in today's world as well. So I'm assuming if we would have continued going through the 60s, 70s, we would have had, spots of trends from the 60s, 70s, like the hair, color dresses, or whatever it may be. But thinking back of, how brides are in the past couple of years, and this year, I just see the 1950s a lot. But I feel like that's the most change. So if you think of starting in 1890, they're
Fashion
different,
changed.
yeah.
In the 1950s, that was after the war. People had more money, so things definitely.
Materials were more available.
Yeah, exactly. There was technology that was not.
Yeah, and communication. You could see. They communicated because people did travel by train and this type thing earlier, and we'd get a paper maybe a month later or something. But now, we can see what's going on in London and Paris and whatever within the instance, So.
Well, we expect a part 2, so starting
Part
60
2?
to the present, okay?
Okay, give us a little time though.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was wonderful. Question for you is regarding the 1922 photo with Robert Kirshner. You noted it was his jacket was more of a morning kind of style, morning coat. Do you think that it might be the influence of World War I?
It could be because those uniforms definitely.
Yeah, and so you had the one example of a wartime groom wearing his military uniform for World War II. Did you find any examples from any other time periods, either World War I or during peacetime or Korea when
Not
they
in the
were
pictures
married
that
in
we
there?
looked.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying there wouldn't be. We hope, and we passed out some things, but I doubt if we have any people here. We have a contest going on right now that if you were marrying Buffalo County, send in your picture and a little write-up, this type thing, and this is going on until next June. Maybe we'll have more pictures that will come. We're hoping to have some real pictures in our file.
And for that contest, it doesn't have to be you, like your wedding. It could be your parents, your siblings, relatives, just pretty much anyone that's a member of your family that was married in Buffalo County. We encourage you to submit a picture, their story, how I met my spouse stories are like my favorite, so definitely submit that, and just their names, and it's a pretty simple contest. But yeah, so we pass out flyers for that. And then it's also on our website, bchs.us.com.
And to say contest is, it's not, you're not
Yeah,
competing.
yeah, I know.
It's drawn.
It's drawn and you get cool prizes.
So we're not picking the best
No, no, no.
winners.